I have a good friend, Miguel Mendoza. He had a quote that I love, and it's so simple. It says, falling down in the water is not what causes us to drown, staying in it. So if you're a dad and you're listening to this and you're in a space that, man, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like everything's coming down around me with my kids. The challenge that you're going through doesn't define who you are as a dad. I still go through challenges every day with my kids. I have faith in God. I have faith in myself and my abilities. I have what it takes to help lead my family out of this. I'm going to take a step forward. And even if it's not the right step, I'm still going to be stepping. I'm going to find it until we figure it out. So having that mentality that when things go wrong, you're going to get back up.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Today, I am stoked to talk to Thomas Pfanner. Looking forward to chatting with him about his experience, about his business, especially, of course, about being a dad. He's got some great insight on that, and we'll get into some of that as we move along. But Thomas, if you can, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your family, and then tell us about your business.
Yeah, name's Thomas Pfanner. My family, I've got a 2-year-old daughter, Leela, 4-year-old daughter, Maddie, and my 16-year-old son, Charles, and then my wonderful wife, Megan. We all live here in Central Oregon. And that intro doesn't really, we hear the intros about our family and what's on the surface, but beneath that, my son was born when I was 18, and a rough relationship with his mother. And so through the journey of fatherhood, my business is called Dads Who Lead. It started because my son rebelled against my leadership when he was in 8th grade and walked out of my life for a period of time. And there was no Charles to fix at that point. The only person that was left around to adjust or pivot for me to be able to impact him and to regain his trust as his leader was me. And so with Dads Who Lead, we help dads amplify their leadership so they can be the trusted and revered leader of their home. And I guess a little bit deeper, the next layer of that a lot of people say, hey, this is really what helped me out from your message, is how to reverse and prevent teenage rebellion.
Awesome. I want to, boy, when you say be the trusted and revered leader in their home, to
Yes.
me that makes a lot of sense in my brain, and I love that. Society sometimes wants to push back on that a little bit where we're at right now. Tell me how you got to that sort of whether you call it your mission statement or what. How did you get to that verbiage in your company?
It came down to, well, who is it that we need to be to be the guide for our family, to be the person who is looked up to and trusted, not because we're a dad who ruled over our family, but we're a dad who leads and that others can follow. And I believe for myself and a lot of the dads in my generation, even older than me, they grew up in a home where there wasn't as much influence in the world. It was a lot more concentrated, and there was a lot more of a culture of, this is what we do. This is how we do it. Don't ask questions. This is the way. And there was no flexibility to lead or choose to lead or choose to follow or not to follow. It was just like, you will do this because I'm in charge. And I wanted to create a different culture and impact within my home. And that's really the genesis of what we focus on, is how can we make it easy for our kids to lean into our leadership instead of having them feel like they have to say one thing and then go do another thing behind our back.
Okay. I love that. Yeah. Being much more of a leader instead of a director, and it's, there's only so much pushing that we can do. Eventually somebody's got to make their own path. And it sounds like it was 8th grade for Charles. So,
yes.
So I want to dig into your past a little bit, because you talked about, the timing of growing up was more along those lines of like, you're going to do this because I said so. And that tends to be, and I talk to a lot of guys about, I used to talk about this a lot in finance, and still do when I'm coaching folks on the finance side of the house, that you tend to follow what you saw in the finance world. Like if your parents were paycheck to paycheck, you're likely paycheck to paycheck. If your parents were good at investing and understood what that meant and you were around that, then you likely kind of gathered that as well. Similarly, we could see that as dads. I parent my kids the way that I saw my parents until something comes in and adjusts that. For you, something came in and adjusted that when Charles was in 8th grade. So tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up. Maybe some of the things you learned that you wanted to do, things you learned that you didn't want to do from your dad, maybe even your dad's dad. Maybe you saw something, in the lineage. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up with your dad.
Sure. So I appreciate that you asked about lineage. My grandfather on my dad's side passed away before I was born. So I never knew him at all other than what I've heard from my dad. And he was a professor at Oregon State. And I believe he was in the Pacific in World War II. And my dad always felt pressure from him to be a good student. And from what my dad said, he never felt like he was a good student. But he did enough to get by. As far as the way that I was brought up, a really powerful part of our family story is that before I was born, actually, almost eerily, 8 or 9 months before I was born, I had a brother who drowned at the age of 18. And so my parents were, they lost, but right after they had lost this child, they found out they were going to be having me. And we have a yours, mine, and ours family. So my mom had 2 kids coming into the marriage, and my dad had 2 kids coming into the marriage. And I was 9 years younger than everybody else, at least like 9 to 15 years younger. So I really feel like my parents did everything they could, and it was important for them to create. There are things that my dad taught me that were in his wheelhouse of teaching me how to sail, teaching me how to throw baseball and a football. But I do believe there was definitely some playing not to lose as far as the way that I was brought up. They're like, all right, well, let's not mess this up. Let's make sure he stays safe. I didn't learn to ride a bike until I was in 6th grade. I didn't learn to swim until I was 10 or 11 years old. And so there were elements of the freedom that were held back. Like it's a lot different than the way that I want to raise my kids, of really focus. Like Dad Julie, we talk a lot about skill development and how we can develop those skills with our kids. So growing up, I was like a latchkey kid. I was home a lot by myself, and very soon they're like, oh, Thomas is really independent. He can take care of himself really well. So we'll just like let him be. Going through high school, it was like, oh, Thomas gets home. He does his homework, plays football, or does whatever sport I was doing, and like self-manages himself. And so they kind of just let me do my thing, which I'm grateful for. But there's also some, especially when I was younger, like 0 to 10, that I wish in a lot of ways I would have been pushed. Like, we're going to get you into more sports teams. We're going to get you like more skill development with whether it's learn to ride a bike or speaking Spanish, something more than just what's being done in school.
Mm-hmm. Was that then for you like when you became a dad, right? Obviously you became a dad when you were kind of still a kid, right? At 18 years old.
Oh yeah.
Legally an adult, but still we all know at this age, more of a kid than an adult. So, what sort of thoughts were going through your brain about, because you had what you experienced as a kid to then pass on to now your son. So how did the conversations go between your parents? How did the conversations go with Charles's mom? How did the conversations go with yourself on where you wanted to take this as an 18-year-old kid with a kid?
Oh, So I guess the first conversation was with my mom, and that was just like, hey, I want to let you know that Laura is pregnant, and didn't really know what was going to come of it yet. I had feelings in my heart like, okay. I knew as soon as I heard that news, I was like, I'm a dad right now. It wasn't like, oh, I'm a dad once this child's born. It was, this child is now dependent on me. I have X time from, let's say it's 8 months. I have 8 months to figure out to put myself in the best position possible to be able to provide for this kid. So that was my thought process. It was like, okay, what do I need to do to provide? And it was never like, oh, like, let's map out a full 18-year plan. It was just like, okay, well, let me just go to work and start working and saving up money. And then whatever ends up happening is going to happen, but I'll be moving in the right direction. It was more about the direction that I was moving than a specific, like game plan at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And that makes more sense. That's, there's a lot of talk about, well, depending on obviously what you're listening to or where you're at, but talk about the stats show that people are having kids later and later in life, right? And there's obviously in my opinion, obviously a maturity issue with younger folks anyways, right? So between that 18 to 30 years old right now, that we're having a hard time getting people started in life. Do you think that being forced to get started in life, because that was one thing that I've heard talks of, and I don't really know if this is true. You kind of are saying that without saying it. Because people were having kids earlier in life before. Now, granted, they were getting married, starting a family, getting started in life earlier, not just having kids earlier. If that is clear enough, but that helped make sure that people stayed mature, they were doing the right things. You just said, like, 18-year-old kid, like, I don't really know what I need to do, but I know that I need to do some adulting right now. Figure out how I can support this kid. What did that do for you as far as like growth in yourself, becoming an adult? Thinking for somebody other than yourself for that
Sure.
that time. How do you think that affected you, short term and long term?
I think it was more about habits developing as an adult. And moving out of high school. High school is a time where, especially somebody like myself, I was typically like, of my 3 years in high school, in my 4 years of high school, 3 of them I was doing 2 sports. So I was pretty busy. I remember waking up at, let's say, 7 o'clock to get to school at 8, to be at school from 8 to 3:30, practice from 3:30 until get done at 6, get home 6:30, dinner, homework, and repeat. And so there wasn't a lot of space other than taking care of business. What I see now, when kids get to college, they have a lot more free time. And so what are the habits that we develop during that period? And so for me, the habits that I developed was, all right, work, go to class, see Charles. It was 2 weeks after Charles was born that I even got to see him. And I was only seeing him once a week for the first year because of conflict with his mom and like not having anything official through the courts yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just a lot of like, I was doing cage fighting and training jujitsu, taking care of my son's finances, and going to class. And so there wasn't really a lot of space for anything other than that. And I was coaching football as well. So I guess, it was on full tilt when I was 18. It was, looking back, it was actually a pretty fun time to be able to focus on myself. I mean, now I have a full family, a full house, right? I've got a wife, I've got 2 more younger kids. Then I had Charles, but I didn't have him in the home. I only saw him a little bit. But I saw a lot of my peers, to answer your question, a lot of my peers developing habits that were like, well, extra time. I don't have class until 10. I can go out and drink and then wake up at 9:30. I could go to bed at 1, wake up at 9. And so those habits none of those party habits really became a part of who I was. Not that I didn't party at all, but it was just like, okay, well, maybe every now and then, but it's not an all the time habit like it was for a lot of peers. So I think it's a lot about not even so much the habits that I adopted, the habits that I didn't adopt that were really impactful.
Was that idle hands are the devil's playground, right? Like it's very easy to get yourself in trouble when you have a lot of time to get in trouble, and if you stay busy and you don't have a lot of time to get in trouble, then guess what you don't get to do? Get in trouble. Like, when you're working and then you're taking care of kids and then you're cleaning a house and then you're going to sleep, not a whole lot of time to get in trouble in there. Like that's a super valid point. I never really thought about it in that direction, but I think that we're, the way that college was sold for a lot of people was, you get to go and learn who you are and just go have fun and do all this stuff. Like, nah, dude, you should be going there learning and getting figuring out what you want to do with your life and not going out and getting hammered all the time. But that's the old man in me, I guess. I don't know. So walk me through a little bit of what that looked like. At the beginning stages, you weren't extremely it sounds like able to even be present in your son's life. So how did you kind of get to the point where you are now, where right before this call, we were already starting, and your son was calling you, and needed something from you, right? So obviously you are involved in your kid's life now, and things have changed a lot. So walk me through kind of those beginning stages from where you weren't being able to see him at all, and then we'll pause at that 8th grade mark when he went back to live with his mom for a little while.
Perfect. Good question. So when Charles was born, I got a call from one of the family members at his mom's side, basically saying, hey, because we had talks about hey, you're going to give me a call when the baby's born. And after he was born, one of the next calls that I got was like, hey, we think it would be better if you weren't involved in his life because he's got these other role models. And you can imagine how my response to that was like, oh, that's not happening. I didn't just go through a whole summer of working in the 90-degree heat, 12-hour days landscaping, and doing whatever jobs that I could to take care of my son to just walk away. And, as I mentioned, we had lost family members before. I wasn't about to lose another family member.
Mm-hmm.
So that was out. And so then my son's mom's family was just very different mindset than I was in a lot of ways. Maybe politically, spiritually, just in a different space. And so I had to go through a process of showing, because I had talked to an attorney, and he said, well, every month during this pregnancy, if things are just kind of icy, send a check. Doesn't have to be a lot of money, but just send a check saying hey, this is for baby stuff. And so because I had submitted, I had documentation that I had sent and there had been received funds for this baby, that was sufficient to say in the court's eyes, this person is a father, has fatherly rights. And so that got me rights. If I hadn't done that, I might not even be in Charles' life. He might have just been we're ghosting you. You're not included. I don't know. I might have had to go through a bigger fight on the back end to earn my spot. But because of that, I was able to think, if there was a court battle, you'd be responsible for attorney fees. And so they're okay, yeah, you can see him once a week. So, from there, once a week turned into, hey, as Laura got to be older, it's oh, actually, I need somebody to watch him for a little while. And so I remember there was one time on a Saturday, she had something come up and she called me or my parents and yeah, of course, we'll watch Charles. And then it just started to be oh, okay, now I guess having a dad is an asset for me as I'm trying to grow. So I started to have him a couple overnights a week. There was a time where I made the decision to move because it was really chaotic. It got to the point when he was 3 where it was so chaotic where I didn't know when I was going to have him and not have him. Mm-hmm. It would be a random oh my gosh, I need you to have Charles tonight. Can you pick him up in 20 minutes? And I'm trying to scramble. And so it was really stressful. And I chose to move an hour away to go to finish school in Monmouth, Oregon, which is a really quiet town. It was a great decision. That's where I met my wife. But I still came back on the weekends. And so I'd have 2 nights with him, Friday and Saturday night every week. So finished up school. I actually got engaged with my wife right after I finished school. We got married and moved back to Eugene to be with Charles when he started kindergarten. And so that's when we started having him 3 days a week. And then it got it up to 50-50. And so the standard was 50-50 for all the way through from until he was in 7th grade. And when he was in 7th grade, to come circle us all back around to your initial endpoint. When he was in 7th grade, his mom moved without any notice to Central Oregon. And I'm sharing this story. I do not want you as a listener to feel like, oh, this person's taking a victim. This is simply the challenges that I went through and overcame. So, don't see this as like a victim card. Really the opposite. This is the goal for this is to share an authentic story. When he was 7th grade, his mom moved away without any notice. Just got a text message like, we're moving to Sisters, which is 2 hours away from Eugene. 2.5. Okay. We're in COVID. So if you remember when kids were starting to come back to school after COVID, and this time I'm working as a PE teacher. I've been, at this point, kids are coming back to school after COVID. They're, having half days where you have half the school coming in the morning and half the school in the afternoon. So the class sizes were small. So you had a little bit of time that he was getting in school each week. And he's like, I don't want to move to Central Oregon. I'm going to stay and finish this school year here. And basically it was decided like, Mom, I don't want to move to Central Oregon. I want to stay with Dad. So for 9 months from, I think it was May, like maybe April of 2021 until January, he was living with me and my wife full time in Eugene and his younger sister, Maddie. And there was a lot of really good things going for him. He got a job during the summer. I coached his flag football team. He was passing all his classes. But during that time, going into that winter, I started coaching wrestling. And he felt like I was more commanding him to perform in school. And I was doing things and measuring, basically putting him in a box that was limiting his, expression of his own heart and expression of his own goals. So he was doing things because I was holding a stopwatch, measuring everything, ruling over his day to day. And so that is one of the factors that contributed, one of the big factors, the ownership that I take, that contributed to that day in January of 2022 when I couldn't get a hold of him after school, didn't know where he was. Yeah, things were a little icy, but I didn't think they were that bad. And he says, Dad, I finally get a call from him about 8:00, which feels like an eternity.
Yeah, of course.
When you're not able to get a hold of your child. I'm done with you. I'm moving in with Mom across state. And at this point, I had gone through filing court paperwork to have him stay with us, and we were going to have a court battle coming up. So I don't know if people have gone through a court battle for custody. It's a very intense period because everything is amplified in what's going on. The performance of the child, the situations of both parents, everything is getting examined of how big of an impact is this person making on this kid's life. And is it in a positive way? And their dad's like, oh, the court system screws over dads. Like, and it's like, well, I'm going to have the mindset that I'm going to go into the game and I'm going to be my best self. And I'm not going to have this layover and just submit to the narrative that mom always wins custody, even though there was a lot stacked against me. When we had that custody battle over the summer of 2022, it was decided that with the contingency of me leaving Eugene, leaving my town, we owned our home there, which like now that's a really big deal, right? Because homes, like it's a lot harder to get in a home. So our home, we did a lot to establish our base there with our parent. My parents lived in town. But if I moved to Central Oregon, I would get all the contingencies that I was looking for with joint custody, 50-50 parenting time, no child support. So then it was decided like I'm going to be able to come back. And if you've lived somewhere, I'm going to use this analogy. If you live somewhere like Michigan where it's really cold, you walk into a house, there are two entries into the house. The first entry is kind of a closet space where you can put your coat, and then you get into the door so that the cold air doesn't get into the house. So getting that court battle and that win, one, it's expensive. But two, I knew that was just the first door. The second door was what kind of connection and relationship am I going to have with Charles now to make an impact? And then when we move out there, is he just going to be like, well, forget this. I don't want to come over. I just want to stay with my mom because life's easier over there. Didn't know. All of those were question marks. I had to have faith in God and my ability and trust that pouring into him and helping him evolve who he is was going to put us in the position to be able to make a positive.
Sure. Those first years when it turned into 50-50 and you were back and forth, what sort of thought process, if any, did you have about like, for lack of better terms, like the philosophy of being dad? Like, what was your, how would you say, especially looking back on it now, you would describe your parenting style then, when he was in like elementary and getting ready to go into junior?
Yeah. I think actually my parenting style was really good for where he was at because I was, I got him involved with scouts. I coached his flag football team from 4th grade all the way through 8th grade every year. And then he played basketball a few years. He played soccer. So getting him involved, getting him signed up for things was big. And my style was really, just to be involved and get him, encouraged. And it was a lot more of, hey, this is the way things are than it is now. And part of that is the evolution of him moving into a teenage year. But there was not the level of depth. Like now that I've gone through this transformation of really rewriting the intention and leadership style behind it, there wasn't the level of intention. It was just like, let me just get my hands dirty.
Yeah, it's like let him do what you were doing, right? Playing the sports, being involved, because that seemed to make you successful in what you were doing, and also what you love to do, anyways, is being involved in sports and whatnot. So, and now the transition, right? So, how long was Charles away before? Like, what was that length of time from January of 2022 until you really started you got through that first door and figuring out how to go through the second?
Sure. It was kind of it was the summer. So after he walked away, which was in January, in the spring, I started to rebuild things. We'd rebuild things a little bit, and then it would collapse again. It collapsed again in May, and I had to rebuild it up again. So I'm like, man, I don't know if this is just going to collapse again. I didn't know what was happening. I remember in June, he wouldn't even talk to me. I was going into the court battle and going into depositions, and my son wasn't even talking to me. And I had to fight and say, this is why he needs to be with me. That it started off with sending him like Instagram reels of football or something, some common thread that we could connect on. And from there, it was like, hey, what if you come out to Eugene, because he still had friends there, for a weekend, and you could help with some housework and maybe earn some money. So then he came out for a couple weekends, and that started to build, and you started to have small conversations that could lead to a little bit more time. So it was from January, and then the spring it kind of rebuilt, and then it felt like everything collapsed again in May. I remember there was a time when he came out to visit, and I was like, hey, this first night, because it was like we got back, because I picked him up in Central London. Tonight, it's going to be family night. You're going to be here, spend the night here, and then tomorrow night you can stay the night with a friend, do whatever. And he ended up like asking to go to the mall to hang out for a couple hours. Like, that's fine, you can go to the mall to hang out. And then split. Couldn't get a hold of him. He just went over to his friend's house, didn't answer my call. He was like, forget you, Dad. You don't have custody of me. All of those things were going on. And so I was like, what do I need to do? Like, I felt like I had come a long way and built it back up and then collapsed again. So January and then October is when we moved in. So it was like, I guess, 9-10 months.
Man, during the, I would imagine that was an extremely stressful, exhausting 10 months of a roller coaster. Emotions, of energy, of everything. Now, in this time, I mean, that was in 2022. So it sounds like you had at least one, maybe two kids at that point. It sounds like your second one was born in either 2021 or 2022, yes. And your oldest one was born around 2020.
Yes. So Maddie was born in 19 and Leela was born in 2022. She just turned. So while Charles was on out in with his mom. And the other part that was concerning was this: it's like he wasn't during that time. He wasn't performing, wasn't really attending school very often, and wasn't performing. So it was clear. I knew if I didn't get it, like regain the connection, he was going to be a high school dropout very quickly.
And sadly, that is a very large statistic without a present father, and they've got a larger chance of going to jail than they do of graduating college when there's a non-present father. So I love that you are fighting for, and I'm gonna call back to one thing you said before is about the court system. There is a lot of conversation, especially I was a military guy, like I said, for years. And watching the amount of divorces and dads who are just like, I'm never going to get custody anyways, because, I'm a military dad. So what's the point in even trying? And it's like, well, it's 100% chance you're not going to get custody if you don't try. Right. So would you rather have a 5% chance? Maybe do what you can to show that you want to be involved. And I want to say that to encourage other dads to say that, like, it really don't have the defeatist attitude. When we're talking about business, we don't have the defeatist attitude in business. Otherwise your business falls apart. But yet for some reason we want to do that with our kids. If there's a divorce, if there's something there. So I really love that you had mentioned that and pushed hard on that. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention too, if you're going through that situation or you foresee it, it's always staying ahead. So I knew from my experience with it, that the 6 months prior is what's going to get measured. 6 to 12 months prior, that's what's going to get measured if you go to court. So it sounds dark to say it this way, but if every day of the year or every day of your kid's life, you look back at the last 6 to 12 months and you say, wow, look at what an impact that I made on my kid's life. That's the best defense that you could ever have against any type of divorce or custody battle, because that's making it you very difficult to go to court against.
Mm-hmm. Man,
more impact that you can have on your kid's life day to day, like dig the well before you're thirsty.
And I'd say that, let's take the divorce and custody and all of that out. That's a valuable way to look at being a dad to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Like, am I being, in the last 6 to 12 months, have I made a positive impact on my kid's life? Have I improved
Absolutely.
their well-being? Have I improved their mental state? Have I improved their physical state, right? Like, what am I doing in the last 6 to 12 months to have made a difference in my kid's life? It's one thing to say, yeah, I put a roof over your head, which, there's a lot of dads that think that that's all they need to do to be a dad. Sometimes it's because they're ill-equipped to be dads, and sometimes it's because they don't want to try any harder than that. But you and I obviously have different missions and mindsets on that we should be striving to be the best dads you can possibly be. To me, my legacy is much more my kids than it is any business that I'm growing, any company that I'm building. Like my kids my name is going to continue on well beyond any business. So, at least hopefully, right? So, I love that 6 to 12 months thought process. Like, yes, if you're in the middle of a potential court battle, then that's great for you to use that. But if you're not, if you're just in your day-to-day grind, you darn well better be looking at that too. That is phenomenal. I need to finish that note. You made me stop taking my note. I got so excited about that. So tell me about your wife's name is Megan, right?
Yes.
So how much stress did this put on you and Megan while you have these two small kids hanging out now while fighting all of these battles and potentially moving back and forth, and like, talk to me about the relationship between you and Megan throughout this process.
Megan's just amazing human, and so supportive. She's very much naturally, and I say this in a very positive way, she's very much naturally a follower, which works out great for our relationship. I'm able to, like, when she's able to see what I see, and she trusts me. And she's always trusted my leadership, no matter what. Even if I didn't make the right decision, she never doubted that I was in the right space. So to be honest, yes, it was stressful, but like going through the process, I mean, especially having the blessing of having Leela during all the challenges, she was there in my corner. It was never, I can't believe we're having to go through this. Can't believe we're having to move. There was definitely some challenges. I mean, there were some other factors as well that were like, man, Eugene just didn't feel like a right place for us to be close to God, the right place for us to grow what I had going with the business. And there was definitely it was a big leap to move and to leave my teaching job, which had been so supportive and such a beautiful part of my journey, and like free time that like I would love to be able to go. There are times, so part of the reason I left teaching was I was getting to the point where, like, playing cornhole and dodgeball and soccer, teaching kids how to set up a dodgeball game. Like, this is not my greatest calling, my greatest impact that I can have on the world anymore. And it got to the point where it was really easy. And that's exactly, I left it because it was too easy. And now, like, I have no regrets because I'm growing and improving as a human and growing a business, and how much we know that growing a business can teach us about ourselves and becoming the best version of ourselves. But there's definitely times where, like, wow, I remember getting done at 3:30, having winter and spring and summer break off, like how like great of a life that was. That's, like, for me, probably the hardest. I'm kind of getting away from Megan. That she has been super supportive. Now, were there times that there's a lot of tension between her and Charles? Yes, that's probably the hardest thing for us. Like, the biggest, I guess, intersecting collision is Charles and Megan's personalities are very different. He's very assertive and strong-willed, and I'm going to rock the boat. I'm going to be dressing different than everybody else. I'm going to be talking different than everybody else. And she's like, let's just go with the flow, not disrupt anybody. I'm here to support. And he's like, how can I create chaos? And I love both of them for the spirit that they bring to those units, but you could see how together it's like they don't always get along amazing. But Megan's always been supportive.
That's great to hear. The conversation, like, did you and Megan have conversations before you got married on what life was currently like between you and Charles, what you wanted it to look like, what you guys thought it was going to look like when you guys had kids, if you guys were going to have kids? What kind of conversations, I should say, did you guys have before you got married about all of this stuff?
Yeah. So the number one conversation that I remember having before we got married, when we were engaged, we went on a backpacking trip at Opal Creek in Oregon, which now is like burnt to crisp, but I'm so glad that we did it when it was around. Was, hey, it wasn't in a demeaning way. It was like, hey, I see this as me being the leader of the home. Like I see this relationship of, like me, like taking, not as I'm going to be in charge, but as like, I'm taking the responsibility of being in charge and being the leader. And I think that's where a lot of people hear leadership or the head of the household and have a visceral reaction, is when they feel like it's from that of superiority. But when you think of it from the space of, I'm taking this responsibility of being the leader, it's a lot different, right? So I'm as a leader to serve. Shortly after we got married, we were living in Monmouth. And I was super happy living in Monmouth. I had a lot of really healthy relationships. With friends, close friends. There was I coached high school football and a program that I loved. There was a lot of growth that was happening I was working as a strength coach, and a lot of growth that was happening and opportunities to grow there. A job that had been offered to me opened up at a great facility. But Megan said, hey, I believe that we need to move back to Eugene for Charles. I think we need to move to Eugene to be closer to Charles, to help him while he's going into school, because he was just about to start kindergarten. So we left Monmouth and moved to Eugene for Charles. And then again, we left Eugene and moved to Redmond for Charles again. So it's to support him. It's to put him in position. But Megan, I got to give credit to seeing that Charles was, even when he was young, before he started school, he was still very, very active, very emotional child. And like his mom not always being consistent, helping him get to school, helping him make sure he's getting involved with things and scouts and sports. He needed that. He needed us there for that next season. And so right after we got married, we decided to move to Eugene. And that was a large part on Megan. She was the one that felt that would be a powerful.
That's when I hear stories like that, it makes me super happy. One, because like to me, and I don't remember if it was pre-recording or on the recording where I talked about it, but like my kids know right where they're at. Like I've got God number 1, my wife number 2, my kids number 3. Because without my relationship with God right, then it's not going to be great for my wife and I. Without my relationship with my wife being right, it's not going to be great for my kids. Like I need to have them in that priority. And the fact that you two had those conversations already and knowing what's going on and knowing that you're a supportive team is showing that the relationship between you two was already strong and you guys were continuing to put that strong. And I cannot stress that enough to folks. And like it always baffles me when you hear like, the man's the leader of the household, and everybody wants to look at, not everybody, I don't want to oversell it, but society tends to look at that as like the patriarchy. And I'm like, there is still like, this is a business and dad podcast, right? So when you look at a business, the CEO is ultimately responsible for the company, but the COO has a massively important role in making sure the company is being pushed along in the right direction, operations are running smoothly. That doesn't take away from the fact that the CEO is ultimately responsible. The COO still has a ton of duties and has a massive leadership role in the company, but somebody has to ultimately be the leader. And my wife and I, like, it's the image I like to throw out there often is, Eve was taken from Adam's rib so that she could be by his side leading, not behind him leading. You guys are
Right.
right next to each other moving forward. But leadership still needs to fall on somebody's shoulders. Somebody needs to be the go-to on where it's at. So the fact that you had that conversation, I'm sure, to me, is extremely important, and I think evidenced by how things have been flowing for the two of you. So now that you're where you're at now, well, actually, tell me where you're at now. How did you get to working in that October of 2022, finally getting to some sort of closure with that, to now, right before, again, we got on this call, you're getting a call from Charles, hey, can you bring something to the school for me? How do we get to that point?
Yeah. So we got here, it wasn't amazing, great, perfect situation, right? He was addicted to marijuana, and he was in a school that he only had to attend a couple hours a day. It was called the Redmond Proficiency Academy, which is cool for a lot of kids. It was more like a community college setup. But for Charles, you talked about responsibility and then having that free time that can move into more harmful activities, right? And that's kind of what was happening for him. Too much freedom. And I was like, my first big challenge coming back as a dad after restoring some relationship and trust was, okay, I've got a teenage son. He's stoned all the time. What am I going to do? How do I need to put him in a position to be successful and have an awakening? So he said, hey, we got to have, I don't think you need, the first thing I did was I had a conversation with him. Like, what do you think what is, like, why are you wanting to smoke weed? Like, what is it doing for you? And so he told me some stuff, and probably a lot of it was like him trying to cover his, I think it helps me focus better or perform better. I'm like, oh, okay. So I said, well, what's really important is you're taking care of your body. And so we're going to get you involved in you need to get involved in some type of, whether it's sports, martial arts, something. And so there was a Muay Thai. I trained jiu-jitsu. At the jiu-jitsu gym that I trained at, there's Muay Thai. So we got him signed up for Muay Thai, and he ended up hating it first. And then he started to see what he was capable of. He started to really like it. I remember the first day we went, and then afterwards he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted. He could barely even, he's like, I could only go one day this week. And he started to build up, and he started to realize, like, oh, when I go to Muay Thai and I'm stoned, that's a lot more miserable experience. And then I'm eating McDonald's. So he's like, okay, maybe this isn't as good. So he started to make better decisions about, okay, I want to work at this. I want to build my fitness, and seeing that the weed was really detaching him from the real world, and it was an escape as opposed to him really leaning into his power as he developed himself as a man. So, that's where it took us. And that journey of him doing martial arts, I remember there was a huge moment. So it was probably November, December when we started training Muay Thai. Fast forward to the summertime, he's going to be transferring schools, which was great because he had a school that's like a normal school day. And we go into get a hold of the wrestling coach. He's like, yeah, we've got a wrestling practice this time. We go in, and he had already done a Muay Thai class in the morning. And they say, hey, yeah, we're getting ready for our summer camp. She's like, oh, cool. Yeah, summer camp. Cool. I told him, you probably wouldn't be able to do the summer camp on this late of notice, though. Like it was like a 3-day overnight camp. And the coach is like, oh yeah, he could. Like, Charles, you probably wouldn't want to just go to a wrestling camp, but you just started like your first day today. He's like, oh yeah, I would. I want to go. So he went from within 6 months of, just being a stoner. And now like day of, there's a wrestling camp that's tomorrow. That's 3-day camp. Like sign me up. I'm in.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I give him a lot of credit for focusing on himself and understanding, and learning about his body and what he wants. But martial arts has really brought us closer together because it's something we can train and do together. And it takes a lot of the pressure off. Because that's just sitting across from a table. There's times where we just sit across and eat dinner or whatever, but if that's all it is, it's like, it's kind of awkward. I mean, even for me, all the work that I do with connecting with Charles and learning to get him, know him better, just sitting, like, talking with him, sometimes it can be awkward. So having something that we enjoy that we do together, it brings up conversations. And it brings up like, oh, this fighter, and he talks about the UFC, and we go back and forth about stuff that's seemingly unimportant. And what I've found is a lot of times those conversations that feel like they're the least important are the ones that are the most important to our kids.
Yeah. And I think it's Stephen Covey. I can't remember the book, but he talks about like, it takes, sometimes you need a 2-hour long conversation to really get to what's going on, because the first hour is just filled with whatever stuff is there. And then you finally start getting into it. So you may just be talking about something UFC, but before you know it, you're talking about something way, way deeper than that, because you've let some guard down. You've been able to now break through some barriers, and you're like connected on a much more personal, emotional level now, because you've broke through all of those. So especially as dudes, like there's almost always walls up there, on a different level, because we like to block our emotions out.
Yes.
So it's like a way to connect. And I think, me personally, I look at martial arts, sports as a whole, but martial arts especially, that I want to applaud you, because martial arts, putting him into martial arts obviously helped, and that's good on you for pushing towards that. But it allows a level of discipline that's not coming from mom and dad. It's coming from a third party that is instilling it. And it's like, oh, like they hear it so much better when it comes from somebody that's not mom and dad, because when it's dad, you're just being authoritarian and telling me what I need to do. But when it's this thing, it's like, oh, I totally get it now. I understand where it's coming from. Like the why behind it is so much different when you have sports or martial arts behind it. What would you say, like, were you guys able to have some of those types of conversations about like the discipline side of martial arts? You said he saw it like in himself. But how were you able to kind of break through in some of those conversations so that you could help influence there as well?
It's really about asking the right questions with the right tonality. So I remember he was having some trouble in school, his freshman year of high school, my first year here, and talking back to his teachers and not doing his school, just doing the minimum. So there was a lot of, okay, what is it that you want to do? Where is it that you want to be going? Getting really clear on that. And that is just what I hit over and over and over. What is it you want to do? Where is it that you want to be going? What are the actions you need to take to get there? What do you need to avoid? Like, what things are going to try to hold you back? So often young men don't have a direction.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just floating. I guess gonna play Fortnite later today. Like, they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it, where they're going. I better go to my shift at Subway.
Mm-hmm.
So having an intentional direction is like the most important thing for me. And everybody in our house knows that that's an expectation from me, my wife, Charles, my younger daughters. Where are you going? What is the direction that you're taking? So I don't complicate it. It's just, where is it you're going? Do you have an intention? We had my dad's 80th birthday party. My uncle came out, and he's in Alaska. His kids have been through college, and he said, "Oh, Charles, do you want to go to the U of O, University of Oregon? After you're done?" Mm-hmm. He's like, "Oh no, I'm gonna go to Thailand and train Muay Thai for a year after high school." And my uncle's like, "Oh, gosh, I wasn't expecting that answer."
Yeah.
Hey, as a dad, I don't care if he goes to college or moves to Las Vegas to train for MMA fight. If he has an intentional direction and he's moving towards it, day by day, week by week, month by month, that's what I care.
Mm. I love that. How are you putting that into practice for your younger two, right? You said that's kind of one of the standards, right? But at a young age, obviously they don't know where they're going. So how are you implementing that for younger kids?
For me, I'm more like, for Charles, he's got a runway I'm just going to use my screen here. It's like this wide that he's going in. For my daughters, they're still like here, right? So with Maddie, it's about skill development so that she has more capabilities. That's something that I see, is that kids become 18, 19 years old, graduating from high school, and they have the same skill set as the other 20 million 18 to 19-year-olds that are graduating from high school.
Mm-hmm. So
we have her doing rock climbing. She's 4 years old and she knows how to ride a bike. She has a physical skill set that's going to help give her confidence as she takes things on. She herself, I will give her credit. We did preschool through homeschooling this past year, and she's like, I really want to be in school. I really want to be around other kids where I can make friends. And so we got her into a pre-K program for next year. So that's her like, okay, this is something that Maddie really wants. She really wants this socialization opportunity. You know, she has her sister and she loves spending time with us. That's something she really wants. Mm-hmm. And she thrives in it. Like, I don't know where she got it from, because it wasn't from me and it wasn't from her mom. She'll be at the park and she'll just go up to a kid and say like, hey, do you want to play with me? Do you want to be my friend? Do you want to play? And 75% of the time they're like, yeah, sure. And then 25% of the time they're like, no, I'm doing something else, or not really. And she's like, okay, we'll go to the next kid. And she, makes friends with them there. So she's great. She's like very much the most social, of everybody in our house. So her like finding that space and giving her opportunities to develop skills, both socially and physically. That's what I'm focused on.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A child setting itself apart is very difficult to do, without intentionality. So if you're intentional about being a parent, then I think that you can. I mean, the world is your oyster. Go and do whatever. Be intentional, and make it happen. So I love that she's that outgoing and ready to go, and that you're encouraging that. So you obviously have had an experience in your life that led you to say, hey, I want to encourage other dads to, live with a purpose. So, and to lead with a purpose. So how did you kind of parlay your experiences into a business?
It was essentially when I was leaving Eugene. I had the retreat program that I was running. And I was actually starting to already pick up because I had a great coach myself, picking up some coaching clients of dads who wanted to improve their leadership and using the principles that I was doing to get Charles back. So it was like, okay, well, I can either continue on the path that I'm on and grow this business, or substitute teach when I moved there. And that was like, I really don't want to substitute teach. That sounds terrible. So we went in on the business, which it has not been like, it would have been an easier choice to substitute teach, save some debt and putting, resources into the business and learning. The whole game of running a business is completely different than teaching. So it was not just an even, easy transition by any means.
Wait, starting a business isn't easy? Whatever do you mean? I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The amount of effort and things that you're not even thinking about when you're starting a business that come into play, that you're like, holy gracious, I had no clue that this was actually a thing. Like, I just didn't understand. So When you went back and you decided to do this, and you were starting to build it all out, like what did it look like to you? What was your you said that you want your kids to have that direction and where they're going. What was your direction? What was your goal as you said, hey, we're moving back over here. I don't want to substitute teach. I want to build this business. This is what it's going to look like. What were you driving towards?
I was still gaining clarity in exactly the overarching, like at the start of this, equipping dads to become the revered leader of their home.
Mm-hmm.
And helping them prevent and reverse teenage rebellion. There wasn't that clarity yet. But there was a clarity of like, all right, how can I support dads who are feeling disconnected? They've maybe had success in business and they're feeling like their connection with their wife, their connection with their kids is hollow. And I felt like I was in a unique position. One, I felt God was calling me to do this. Two, I felt like I had a unique perspective as a former teacher. I had worked with so many different kids. When people are talking to me about their kids, I can picture their kids in the PE class and how they would behave. So there is that unique perspective. I don't know if that answers your question. I felt like I'm going off a little bit.
Yeah, you're good. I want to dig into your mission statement now, right? Like you got to the point now where you have a solid mission statement, what you're going for. I want to really key into, and this is very selfish motivation here, as my oldest is 9, right? Prevent teenage rebellion. So many people I talk to, so many dads that I've talked to, they're like, oh, well, just wait till the teenage years. They're going to hate you anyways. It doesn't matter what you do. And I think to myself, what a defeatist, terrible attitude. Like but then I look at it and go, well, I haven't been there. So like, is that defeatist or is that realistic? I lean towards it's defeatist. And I think that's a pile of garbage. I think my kids are going to be wanting to be hanging out with dad, not more than their friends. Like I want them to go hang out with their friends and stuff, but I want to say that I'm going to be the type of dad that they're like, no, I love hanging out with my dad. I want to go hang out with him. I want him to be there teaching me this or taking me there or, being my support system here and there, and not be that rebellious kid. So what is it? What kind of tactics do you use in your business? What kind and in your life to get to that prevention of teenage rebellion?
But before we can even talk about tactics, we have to understand what causes rebellion. I believe that's where most people go off the edge because they don't even understand when it's starting. They think it starts when they do the opposite of what they say hey, I need you to do the dishes. No, I'm not doing the dishes. They think that's where it starts, and it doesn't start there at all. So box theory says that. So box theory is a very important principle in Dads Who Lead. So I'm going to share with y'all about that. If you were in school, Adam, and you remember sitting in class, and maybe it was a 75-minute class, and the clock's ticking down at the last 2-3 minutes before the bell rings. What do people start to do?
Oh, they're already putting their stuff away, shuffling, getting ready to roll out, not paying attention to anything going on. Yeah.
And then as soon as that bell rings, what happens?
They're already up and out. Everything's already packed. They're prepped. They're out the door.
They're out the door. So we use that as an analogy. And the longer this is in place, the more extreme this is. So I saw this as a teacher right before lunch. This was even more so. There's a longer build up. They've had 3 or 4 classes and they're even running even faster to get to the cafeteria and their friends and everything else they're looking for. And in the school year, on the school day, it's the same. And then in the school year, it's complete anarchy. They're pulling fire alarms. They're throwing papers in the air. They're getting in fight. Like it's a crazy day. The longer the resistance has been in place and the more restrictive it's been, the faster and harder they're going to push back against it. So basically that's what box theory is. When people feel like they're put into a box, they're going to push back with tremendous opposition. So we need to identify where in our relationship with our kids we're putting them into a box. And if we become a dad who is associated with rules and expectations and not growth, we will be seen as a police officer. And nobody wants to spend time with police officers because you're just holding a standard. It's like, let me see. I know there's typically a cop here. Maybe I'll take a different route because then I can go a little faster and not have to worry about it. That's where a lot of things can start to derail. So the next question is, great. How do I hold expectations for my kids if I don't put them in parameters?
Mm-hmm.
And so then we talk about the spheres of independence. So like you ask the question, we're going to go into it, if that's cool.
Yeah. No, love it. Yeah.
So the spheres of independence. So if you think as opposed to a box, you put your kid's name down. So you write your 9-year-old's name down in a circle. And that circle is what he or she is capable of doing right now. It doesn't matter what the activity is. I use the example of my son was in 6th grade. Going into 5th to 6th grade, he knew how to ride a bike, but he didn't know all the traffic signals, didn't know how to get around town.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, Charles' skill set is here. I don't want to have to drive him to school and back every single day. I need him to be here. So I'm going to invest in him and spend 4 or 5 hours teaching him how, what the street signals are, the route to get to the school, how to get there safely until this 11-year-old boy can ride from 4 miles from our house to his school and back on his own. And he's leading the whole way, doing the right, everything right, the safe way. Okay. Now he has the skill set to do this. Now I've transformed this dichotomy of my dad's putting me, I'm going to use my phone because it's basically like a square. My dad's putting me in a box. My dad is giving me skill sets to be able to do more things on my own, more independence, because he just gave me a skill that unlocked a whole nother level. So when you're the dad that's unlocking skills and helping your kids develop and guide them, they see it, even if it's a similar expectation. They see your expectations and your standard of excellence in your home as at the subconscious level. This is helping me grow. They don't think about that's what happens when they see your name pop up on the phone and they see your picture. They're going to have an instant reaction. And it's not going to be from the way they should or shouldn't feel or what your rules are. It's just going to be the reaction that they have. And it's something once your name pops up, it's out of our control. It's what we've done recently, like we talked about earlier in the episode, to help them grow. And if they, at the subconscious level, associate this person like, oh, I respect this person, he holds their standards, they're aligned with who they say they are and the actions that they take. And this is like a deeper dive into what we work on with dads that join our program. I respect this man and he's helping me grow myself. So you could be respected by everybody in the business world, but that doesn't necessarily transfer over unless you also have a strong connection with your kids and you're helping them grow in some way. And they don't see, oh, okay, yeah, he paid for my violin lessons. They don't see that as associating you with growth. They see their violin teacher as associating them with growth. Unless you're teaching them violin, then they'll associate you. So it takes that investment of our time in helping them develop something that's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I was writing circles of my son and how trying to think through that, and the idea that it is rather helping them grow into a larger circle rather than be retained into a box, right? So I don't want to butcher my own way of saying it. So let me throw it back to you and say, okay, what would have been a way of keeping Charles in a box when it comes to riding the bike to school, right? How would you have led that incorrectly to have then kept him in a box? I don't know if that question is making sense.
If I would have been like, hey, you have to learn how to ride your bike. If I would have not given him any help or instructions, like you have to learn how to do this, then I would be for you have to ride your bike to school. Not you get to ride your bike to school. That's one frame. If I would have kept him dependent on me, driving him to school every day, dropping him off. Now I'm keeping him in a box because he's not, he's dependent on me. He's not dependent on himself. I guess if you're helping your kids develop skills, there's no way to, you're going to be doing great. But when I messed up was when he was 8th grade. Like, what are your grades? Let's make sure we got this court case coming up. Let's make sure that your grades are looking good. Let's make sure you're getting to bed on time. Let me give you this Fitbit and we can track your sleep and make sure your sleep is good because I'm worried about your sleep. And then your phone, we're going to make sure you're regulated how many hours you're on your phone. And it ended up creating a lot more tension between us because I was overseeing so much of what he was doing. And he really saw me, the brand that I created, was a source of restriction.
Okay.
So I had done great things in my past, and now I see okay, that's why this worked, because I was working on his growth. But when I got away from that, that's when things went bad.
What sort of things now are you trying to implement or continuing to implement with your son now that he's 16 years old, and there's obviously a bit more independence for a 16-year-old than there is as a 12-year-old. So kind of what
Sure.
are you instilling in his life now as a dad to keep that process flowing?
Great question. Because it's something it's a continued journey. I still struggle with it, right?
No way. You haven't become the perfect dad yet? Wait a minute. We spent an hour and 10 minutes talking, and now I'm not even talking to a perfect dad. Son of a gun.
So he actually will sometimes lean into wanting more help than he needs. And I have to remind him that he's capable of doing it on his own. For example, he was riding his bike home the other day and he saw me pass in the truck and he called me. He's like, "Hey, could you come back and pick me up?" I was like, "No, you don't need to depend on me. You can get home on your own." It's like, grumpy about it. He has ride his bike. But the big thing, he's learning to drive now, right? He has his driver's permit. So that's another opportunity. I'm going to help him develop that skill. So if you have a teenager, that's a really powerful time when they're getting their driver's permit because they're associating it with this new skill. And that one-on-one time, those 100 hours that they have to get with you, that's really valuable time that you're not going to have another chance like that. So that's one that's really, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's something that's kind of built in to a rite of passage, is getting that driver's license and helping your kids develop that skill of driving.
And that can be an exhausting part of a dad's life, I would imagine. I remember my dad once in a while teaching me how to drive stick, and I think I stressed him out. He does not like being in the passenger seat at all. So I think that going into that now looking back at it and hearing what you're saying, going into it with that mindset of, I'm giving my kid a bit of a growth opportunity and I'm providing something to them, really changes it rather than just, I'm doing this because I have to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. I like helping Trey. He just recently got his permit. I like helping him. And selfishly, Charles is typically has a pretty big, oh yeah, I can do that. And so then we get in the car and he's driving the stick. He's like, "Oh, that's harder than I expected." And he messes up and, he's always calling other people out when things don't go well. So then, when he messes up and I'm just like, it's cool. It's part of the process. He has this moment that's like, okay, so it's okay to mess up. Yes, it's okay to mess up. We've been in the right environment. Now, once you're on the road and you're driving and you hit another car, that's a bigger problem. But as you're learning the skill in a parking lot, this is the safe place to mess up.
Yep, for sure.
And then getting into tournaments, try to give Charles credit for this too. He wants to do wrestling tournaments, even off the season, giving him a chance to do that. Anything where I can support his growth, with his body, with his skills. I'm looking for those. I'm consciously have an eye out for them. I think that's one of the big things is if we don't know to look for it, we won't find it.
Yeah. And I think that's the downfall of being an autopilot dad. Or an autopilot parent as a whole is you're not looking for anything. You're just, hoping things are going the way they need to. I'm, I did the things I'm supposed to. I put some food on the table and I, asked them how their day was. So I'm all right. But, if you're engaged and looking for the ways to improve and the ways that are going to make your kid's life better, I think that you're always, and to the, ridiculous joke I said earlier, right? No dad is perfect. You're not, I'm not, like, it doesn't matter. Like I'm talking to as many dads as I can so I can steal their good ideas and share their good ideas with other people, because I'm not a perfect dad and I want to be better at this stuff. So, if you have a growth mindset as a dad, that's going to be nothing but helpful for you and your kids across the board. What sort of conversations do you have now with Megan as far as how you're how you're raising your two kids, how things have gone? What sort of lessons have you guys kind of sat back and been like, okay, well, this is what we learned. This is what I want to be able to share with the other dads in my group. This is how I want the dads in my group to talk to their wives. Like, what sort of conversations do you and Megan have that you are pushing on other folks to share with them?
Yeah, that's great. I really like that you asked that. It's not something that I talk a lot, but there's a few levels to it. Well, number one, before you get into anything else, first and foremost, what's your wife need? Where is she wanting to go? What does she want to grow? So for Megan, she likes running. She likes doing half marathons. So supporting her. And I remember we had a date night a few weeks ago, and it's like, hey, what is the next 3 months? Like, what is the one thing that you're really looking to get out of these next 3 months? And, cause there's a lot, women, they have I have all these ideas, and what's the one thing you really want to get out of the next 3 months? So like the questions like that, allow me to know where she's going, where I can help guide her, where I can support her, and it helps her feel heard and, intentional with, the questions that I ask is going to be powerful for my wife as well. As far as with Charles, it's probably the biggest. I mean, Maddie and Leela are like super easy compared to parenting Charles, because she's stepmom. She doesn't have the authority that she does. One, it's teenager, so like the authority dynamics. If you have teenagers, it's shifting. It's not the same as when they were 8. You don't have the level of authority of leadership capital and dependence that they have on you is a lot different at 16 than it is at 8. And so they're going to be naturally more, they're going to naturally challenge more. And the skill level of leadership has to be a lot higher with a teenager than it does with an 8-year-old. So with Charles, I was noticing that Megan and their interactions was really cold the last couple weeks. And I just brought to Megan, I said, I don't know how to start the conversation, but I see tension between you and Charles. And, her reaction is like, I don't know what else we can do to change it. And this is actually a great lesson for this podcast. My wife had a lot of defense. She threw a lot of defense at me when I brought up this problem that I saw that Charles and her were not. And she's like, are you saying that I need to change something? I'm like, I'm not saying you need to change something. I'm saying that I notice it and that I don't know exactly what to do, but I can see that there needs to be a change. And I don't have all the answers, but I can see the tension between you and him. I don't want to ignore it and think that it's going to get better on its own. And I can see, the energy that you give off, it affects him. I can see the energy that he gives off, it affects you. So after that, I was like, I walked away. I was like, man, I don't know if that went so well. I didn't know. But then Charles got home and Megan was then like, she totally flipped the switch and was like positive. I was, made extra chicken for you. She had this total, the shift. Like, I didn't know that's the beautiful thing about the woman is they could say one thing and then end up their actions being something else. Sometimes that's not the direction that we want, but in this case it was. So having the conversation, it planted the seed. And so that's a lot of it is like planting the seed of this is what I'm seeing. And I'm not saying to do anything or don't do anything. but this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a perspective, and I want to bring this to your attention. I don't need you to change anything. So then when she does change, it's because she wants to change, because she now sees a different perspective, and she's not forcing her. Have this conversation, apologize for this. Is just an organic, it's coming from her own. And that's the best version of her that anybody's going to get.
Yeah. Especially if you're changing for change's sake or changing because somebody tells you to, then the inauthentic level of your change is not going to be lastful. Like it's just not going to, it's just not going to be as helpful or influential. So do you intentionally bring those types of conversations into the coaching side of the house as well, into the business, to kind of say, hey, what kind of, because to me, obviously if you're a single dad, then this is not as congruent with where you're at, but like the ability for you and your wife to be able to communicate in a way that allows you both to be better parents and thus you become a better dad is unbelievably important. So, like, how is it that you usually talk to / coach dads through communicating with their wife and making sure that level is rising as well, so that they can be, as a partnership, better parents and thus a better dad?
Yes. So I'm going to give you kind of a snapshot answer on this, but there are 5 levels to our coaching program, and respect is the 3rd level. And respect, communication, earned respect, so that when we're having a conversation, it's an enjoyable experience. We don't need to go on a trip together. We need to be able to get home and have a 15-minute dinner, 20 minutes together, and have that be a pleasant interaction. That's the first thing. So if you've earned respect, number 1 with women, we have to be someone that she can look up to. Are you exercising? Are you handling the kids in a positive way? Are you someone who the outside world and her, she looks up to and is like, yeah, that's a good man. So handling yourself first, that's kind of our ownership pillar. That opened the door to earning her respect through mutual healthy conversation. And when you have that, one of our family values, like tying this all back to, this is our own personal family value, it's not a business value, is compassionate honesty. So we know we are going to be honest with each other, and we're going to do it in a compassionate way. So it's not like, I can't believe these dishes aren't done. That's not compassionate honesty. It's honesty, but it's not compassionate. You're coming from a dark place. And I know you have like all the kids and a lot of challenges going on, and the dishes are done. It like stresses. It's stressful for me to go into, like, when she works 3 days a week. So those 3 days, I'm like, buckle up, putting on the backpack with the 2-year-old, and we're going on adventures with the 4 year. Like I'm hitting it hard on dad mode. For the time that she's going into work. So during that time, I, there's might be something that I need, but if I come with the wrong angle, it just doesn't land well. Like, you got to come from the space of love and growth. So yeah, compassion, honesty. For us, that's what we do. But as far as with the coaching, there's a sequence. We have to make sure that we're taking ownership over ourselves first as men. And that just puts us in a position to be able to have a successful, authentic, earned respect from our wife. Both, there's like 2 sections of it. There's being the man that's respected, and there's having this relationship and communication skills, so that she feels loved and heard. So those together are really powerful.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard this from, but maybe it was Jordan Peterson. I don't remember. It sounds like something he would say. But where he talked about, or the person talked about, oh, well, my wife is not respecting me the way I need to, or, oh, I can't find the woman that I need to. Are you being the man that your wife would want to treat that way, right? Are you showing up in a way that would encourage your wife to treat you the way that you want to be treated? right? Because maybe that's what we're doing wrong. Like the fact that you put like, hey, take that ownership of yourself first. Like, what am I doing? And you started this even when you were talking about your son when he went back with his mom, and you were like, okay, well, the only thing I could change right now is me. What is it that I can do to show up better? What is it that I can do? Like, where can I take ownership in this? And it goes into like Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. Like, where can I always take ownership is in what I am doing. What did I do that could cause this? What can I do to get the result that I want out of my spouse, out of my kids, out of my job, out of my wherever, my employees? Yes. What is it that, how can I show up better? And, too many times, and you joked about it. It was almost sad that we have to joke about it. So I'm not saying this because of a victimhood type of thought process, but everybody's so quick to pull out their victim card and talk about how sad they are, like how much pity we should have for them because of how many victim cards they have. And it's like, no, what are you doing with your life? Where are you wanting to go? What take some responsibility. You're not a victim. Yeah. You're not like you're a human being walking this planet who's going to go through hardships and problems. You're a dad who's going to have issues with their kids and their spouse and all the other stuff. What are you doing to show up in a way that allows your kids to want to hang out with you and to be led by you? The same thing with your spouse. So I absolutely loved that. Well, I want to pass it over to you as we're getting ready to wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover that maybe I said that struck something that you wanted to mention that we haven't quite talked about yet, or any questions you have for me or anything like that?
Yeah, just as you were saying that and the victim situation, it made me think of I have a good friend, Miguel Mendoza, and he's really powerful podcast as well. I encourage you to try to reach out to him to get him on this. Okay. He had a quote that I love, and it's so simple. It says, "Falling down in the water is not what causes us to drown. Staying in it."
Mm.
So if you're a dad and you're listening to this and you're in a space that, man, like I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like everything's coming down around me with my kids. The challenge that you're going through doesn't define who you are as a dad. I still go through challenges every day with my kids. It's all right. I have faith in God. I have faith in myself and my abilities. I have what it takes to help lead my family out of this. And I'm going to take a step forward. And even if it's not the right step, I'm still going to be stepping. I'm going to find it until we figure it out. So having that mentality that when things go wrong, you're going to get back up. Mm-hmm. It sounds like a cheesy line from a movie, but it's so true.
Yeah. Just apply it. It doesn't matter whether it sounds like a cheesy line. It's the same thing. Like cliches are cliches for a reason because they make sense and they fit. Yes. So, but Thomas, I have greatly appreciated our conversation. I thank you so very much for jumping on here and sharing your story, sharing your knowledge. I hope that plenty of people reach out to you. And if they wanted to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yes, we have dadswholead.com. Go there. There is a free leadership quiz. It will give you a full breakdown of your leadership style, how you naturally lead, the strengths of that style, and how to leverage them, as well as common gaps to be aware of. That's my gift for anybody that's interested in our community. So if you take that quiz, that will get you looped in into our Dads Who Lead community and email list. And if you get an email from me, just reply to it, and then I'll get it on my end, and I can hit you back. If you want to follow on social, like Dads Who Lead on Instagram, I'm not real active on there, but if you send me a message there, I'm happy to get back to you as well. But the best thing is to go to that leadership quiz, because that'll get you into our podcast and any other opportunities we have.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Thomas. Thank you for everybody who's listening. And something that was mentioned here, maybe want to kind of end with this quote. Be a good man, not just a nice guy, right? I've got it up on my board as a good reminder. Like we need to make sure that we're striving to be good men, which does not mean you're a nice guy. A nice guy is sometimes a worthless guy, but a good man is not. So, thank you so very much, Thomas. Again, I appreciate it. Everybody listening, please like, subscribe, comment, let us know what we can do to improve. Tell us where you think we did awesome. Tell us where you think we screwed up, and I'll gladly delete those comments. I'll reply to those comments as well. Thank you all very much. Thank you again, Thomas, and we'll see everybody on the next one.